I think we'll go ahead and get started tonight. Welcome to today's webinar, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're going to be focusing on America 250 and the landscape of history education this evening out here on the East Coast. I'm Sarah Weicksel. I'm the Director of Research and Publications and the incoming Executive Director of the American Historical Association, which was founded in 1884. And I'm very excited to be joined this evening by Ed Ayers, David Blight, Emma Humphries, and Katharina Matro for a discussion about American Lesson Plan, Teaching U.S. History in Secondary Schools, a report that was recently published by the American Historical Association, and thinking about this in terms of America 250 as we look ahead to 2026. I'm going to start with the briefest of introductions of these highly accomplished panelists before we turn to a brief overview of the findings of this report and then head into a conversation. Edward Ayers is Executive Director of New American History and BUNC, online projects that are designed to help students and teachers to see the nation's history in new ways. He is University Professor of the Humanities and President Emeritus at the University of Richmond. And he has been named National Professor of the Year and received the National Humanities Medal. He's been awarded numerous prizes, including the Bancroft for his work on American history. David W. Blight is Sterling Professor of History and Director of the Gilder Lehrman Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance, and Abolition at Yale University. His work has received numerous awards for his historical scholarship, including the Pulitzer Prize and the Bancroft. At the beginning of his career, he spent 7 years as a high school teacher in his hometown of Flint, Michigan. Emma Humphries joined iCivics as Chief Education Officer in February of 2016. She also began her career as a classroom teacher in North Florida, where she taught all levels of American government, American history, and economics. She holds a PhD in curriculum and instruction from the University of Florida and a BA in political science. She was awarded a James Madison Fellowship in 2004 and was a founding member of the iCivics Educator Network. Katharina Matro teaches world and U.S. history at Walter Johnson High School in Bethesda, Maryland. She previously spent 5 years teaching history and economics at Stonebridge School of the Sacred Heart. She graduated summa cum laude from Amherst College, holds an MA from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, and a PhD in Central European History from Stanford University. So a bit about why we're here. In 2022, the American Historical Association launched the most comprehensive study of the national U.S. history teaching landscape that has been undertaken in the 21st century. And we wanted to know what is actually happening in public schools across the country. No one had an evidence-based answer to that question. So we recently released American Lesson Plan, Teaching U.S. History in Secondary Schools. And this report distills insights that were gained from our 2-year exploration of secondary history education. That study involved a 50-state appraisal of social studies, standards, and legislation, as well as a deep dive exploration of local contexts in 9 states. We surveyed over 3,000 middle and high school U.S. history educators. We conducted long-form interviews with over 200 teachers and administrators, and we collected thousands of pages of instructional materials from a wide range of locales, from small towns to sprawling suburbs to big cities. So what did we learn? Well, quite a lot, as the 200 pages of report might suggest, but I want to highlight in broad strokes 4 of our key takeaways. First, secondary U.S. history teachers are professionals who are concerned primarily with helping their students learn central elements of our nation's history. Teachers want their students to read and understand founding documents that prepare them for informed civic engagement. They also want their students to grapple with the complex histories and legacies of the American past. The study did not find indoctrination or politicization. Second, teachers are making important curricular decisions that have direct influence over what students are expected to learn. Despite efforts by state agencies, district administrators, and school principals to align, synchronize, assess, and discipline instruction, teachers continue to have substantial discretion in deciding what they teach, how they teach it, and what materials they're using. And so what do they rely upon to support their teaching? We found that teachers primarily rely upon free or low-cost online resources rather than traditional textbooks like I grew up with. And they rely on a short list of trusted sites that are led by federal institutions, including the Library of Congress, the National Archives, and the Smithsonian. And then 4, the clearest impediments to history education across the United States are a lack of resources, instructional time, and professional respect. Many of the teachers in our study wished for more time and opportunity for professional learning focused on historical content. In essence, what happened, how, and why. History education needs more time, attention, and public resources devoted to it. So, to our panelists, you have read this very long report, and I'm interested to know what was in it that might have surprised you, or what is an important takeaway for you?
Goodness, no surprises, just lots of validation. And in some ways, it felt like a love letter to America's history and civics educators who got into this work because they love our founding story, they love our Constitution, our founding documents, they love their country, and they want to share that passion with students. So for me, it was that first finding that you read off right from that. I mean, I love it, means so much to me that you started with this. It was so validating that secondary US history teachers are professionals, and that part was in bold, and I think on purpose, as that's what they are. They're professionals who are concerned mostly with helping their students learn central elements of our nation's history. And then if you go deeper into the report, you'll see, and I quote, "We did not find indoctrination, politicization, or deliberate classroom malpractice. If there's any wholly inaccurate message being sent by our schools to millions of students and their families," again, I'm quoting here from the report, "it is that history is not important enough to command time, attention, and public resources." So all this airtime we're giving to accusations of divisive issues and indoctrination is completely shadowing the real issue, which is that we are not emphasizing the subject matter that our constitutional democracy, our republic requires. And for me, that was the most profound, most personal, and most compelling finding from the report.
Any order you want us to go in, Sarah?
The order in which you speak.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, I'll just pick up on what Emma said. It was a good news report, and I guess somewhat surprisingly because of all the, let's be honest, right-wing attacks on public education, all the bad news about what supposedly was happening in classrooms with CRT, etc. Um, the report shows there is a national teaching culture that thousands of teachers share the same dilemmas and in many ways same aspirations. It shows that teachers want to make their own choices. They want to run their own curriculums. They are not letting parents' rights take over curriculum. That I found very encouraging. And also, of course, teachers want to learn about pedagogy. They always do. But this report shows they're keenly interested in, content, more reading time, more good history. That seems so basic, but it's also very encouraging. They're not afraid of complexity, complicated conflicts in the past. They're not afraid of the dark parts of the past. In fact, they want to know more about it. And there seemed to be a real thread here about how they tend to reject extreme ideologies, whether that's deemed from the 1776 project or the 1619 project or whatever project. They're not very ideological. And they love storytelling. That comes through. They don't have to be told that teaching in the classroom at particularly the secondary level means you got to learn to tell good stories. And that they are deeply concerned, for obvious reasons, at the survival and flourishing of public schools, which is a serious issue in this country. So those are just some of the things that I found when I was a reader for this, I guess back when, even before the report came out. And so I had to write up my own report about it. And that's how I started my report, with these 6 or 7 big themes that just stuck out. And above all, perhaps we now actually have some data. We actually have some data about what is being taught in the various periods of American history by secondary school teachers.
Randy, you want to go? You want me to? Oh, I
You're gonna have to call on us, Sarah. You got to
All
be.
right, I'll call on you. Ed, you're up next.
So I'll do a typical academic thing here and problematize it because I agree with everything that Emma and David said. It comes through so clear, and documenting that teachers uphold and embody the highest ideals of the nation is my takeaway from it. But I have to admit that I was surprised that 23 states last teach the founding in elementary or middle school. And so and not just the founding, anything before the Civil War. So what that means is that kids are coming into this anniversary, maybe having thought about this 4 or 5 years ago, before they were really in a position to grapple with the complexities and even the importance of this era. On page 49, there's a great graphic representation of that fact. So I guess I would encourage us to build on all that this wonderful report shows, to sort of gird ourselves for a unified effort to help each other across these artificial divides, even, not just secondary and higher ed, but secondary and middle school as well. So I'd like to see us address that. How can we be of use? Because I think teachers of 11th and 12th grade are going to need to be able to find authentic ways to introduce the founding into their curriculum. And so that struck me as the surprising challenge that came from this wonderful report.
I can just add to this. I, as a teacher, was not surprised by any of the findings in the report, because I feel like I live them every day.
Right.
But what I think what Ed just is something worthwhile to think about. I was just as Ed was talking, reminded of a situation just this past week. I'm in the middle of teaching the civil rights movement, and just as we were getting started talking about Brown v. Board, and put the text of the 14th Amendment on one of my slides. Now, that's not obviously the revolution, but I was asking them, where's this from? Where's this text from? And they, this is 9th and 10th graders, they could not tell me. And of course, my whole lesson was set up around this idea that now we are going, now we're talking about the 1950s, and now we're going back and we're remembering what the country is founded on. And now we're going to fight for this in a different context. They were telling me, oh, this is from the Declaration of Independence. Oh, this is from the Bill of Rights. So I think that is something worthwhile thinking about. How do these institutions that are set up in the 18th century and the texts that we should be studying from the 18th century, how do they come back, and how can we re-engage them, even if we're not in the middle of teaching 1776? And the report shows that, right? That the way in which US history education is truncated across different age levels in many states.
And just to put a pin in Katharina's very good point, we have to think long and hard about how do we seamlessly introduce this, I hate to use the word introduce, but that'll be the case, or reintroduce this idea of the founding to students who haven't thought about it, studied it for years, or teachers who have never taught it. So it's not like, hey, it's America's 250. Of course, all of us social studies teachers are going to get on board and we're going to make this a big part of our scope and sequence. No, I mean, in a lot of ways, it'll be around peg in a square hole, or vice versa. I always mess that idiom up. But nonetheless, how do we support teachers so that they make this meaningful and it's not just this aside, this tangent, but they're able to sort of bring it into their curriculum and make it a really meaningful experience. And the good news, the one thing that we have on our site is time. It's not a one-day event. It's not a 1 week or 1 month event, right? It's a year-long celebration. So we can support teachers, we can on-ramp them, provide them what they need, and allow students to celebrate this and recognize this really momentous occasion alongside all of us.
And, you know, we can also keep pushing it forward and make it less than or more than a 1-year event, and so and commemorate not only 1776 but continue pushing forward to some of our founding documents with the Constitution and into the founding era.
Sarah, may I quickly respond to what Katharina just said, just quickly?
Absolutely.
What a lesson you just reminded us of at all levels. You were teaching about the second founding, and you know, in academia now we've been calling it the second founding, and book after book after book, it's in the titles of books and on and on and on. But that doesn't mean that people are growing up knowing that. It's a second founding, and that 14th Amendment is the core of it, of course. I saw a poll recently, it was right after the executive order on birthright citizenship, that showed somewhere in the mid 50 percentile of Americans didn't even know that birthright citizenship was somehow in the Constitution. So we have a lot of work to do.
Well, one of the fact that less than 50% of states require teaching the Revolution in high school was definitely one of the surprising things for me.
Mm.
But over half of surveyed teachers named the American Revolution and the founding era as among their 3 favorite topics to teach across all of US history. And that's the highest of any subject area. And the founding era was also the second highest ranked topic after the civil rights movement for high priority coverage. And when they were asked to explain, teachers most cited the notion of our civic origin story. What do you make of this? And how, as we've started to kind of dig in here, how do we take this energy and excitement for teaching the founding and use it in terms of shaping how we teach subsequent eras, especially in light of the fact that students are not all being taught the Revolution, the founding in their high school courses?
Once I start talking about this, you won't be able to shut me up. So I really want to defer to someone else on the panel to go first.
I'll go ahead.
That makes me want to hear you even more, Emma. Please go.
No, you got, yeah, no. David, then Ed, then Katharina. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
All right. Well,
there's a teacher for you.
yeah. Well, okay. Somebody's got to give us our assignments here. That's okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, way back in the day, I used to love teaching the era of the Revolution and Constitution. Not sure I knew what I was doing, but I don't get to teach that anymore. I wonder if it doesn't have something to do with just origins. I mean, there's a human instinct for origins. We love origin stories. And, you know, whatever degree, to whatever degree teachers, you know, buy into some idea about America's uniqueness or whatever, exceptionalism, I suppose, is the word. This is the origin story. Now, it's a complicated origin story, of course, deeply rooted in slavery and a lot of other conflicts. But I also wonder if sometimes, and this is not a criticism of any teachers, the American Revolution tends in the popular imagination to be without controversy. It doesn't have, it's not the Civil War with its massive slaughter and deep divisions that went on forever. Although the American Revolution was a very bloody war and a civil war within the society. But anyway, I wonder sometimes if the founding era, and we get that Constitution out of it, and you know, in some ways, the Constitution has survived a very long time. It's not a disputed history as sometimes other periods may be. I don't know. That's not a reason to not admire those who love teaching it, because it's so important.
I can I can maybe add to that a little bit. I think when you read the report, I was just rereading it earlier tonight. I think there's something to it. I don't think the report mentions this, but I think teachers may perceive it as currently not a divisive topic, right?
Uh-huh.
And I think what comes out in the report, I don't teach it because I teach in Maryland, and in Maryland we start with Reconstruction in 9th grade. But
Oh,
in the report, what comes out is that teachers actually do a really good job of talking about the divisions and talking about the different options that were on the table. So in some ways, it seems like in the popular imagination, yes, here's a teacher teaching something that every American agrees on, but at the same time, it's a topic that allows the teacher to introduce notions of debate and contingency and this could have gone another way and serious conflict. So it's almost like it allows the teacher a little bit of a laboratory to for history in a way, what we want history to be in a context and content area that maybe is perceived to be as less divisive. So the teacher in the classroom doesn't have to feel like they're self-censoring, or they worry about, oh, what's my administrator going to say? What's the parent going to talk to me about on the phone? At the same time, the children get introduced to different historical perspectives and different actors and all of that. So I wonder whether that plays a role.
You know, it
Very.
seems, it says in the report that many teachers don't include women and Black Americans and Native people in their discussion of the revolution. So in some ways, it's a stage, to go back to David's point, it's an origin story, and Katharina's point, it's a kind of a play. I mean, Federalists, anti-Federalists, okay? Choose sides, you know, shirts, skins, whatever, you know. And we love the documents, we love the PDFs.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if we actually used a broader range of documents to actually look at, you know, maps and images and numbers even, to get a sense of what was at stake in the society as a whole. You know, I live about 8 miles from Monticello, so I can feel the vibes coming off the Declaration of Independence even as we speak. And he was trying to solve problems, not just create a great nation. I mean, so I think if we kind of thought about this from the outside in, as well as from the great documents out, put those in conversation more, I think that we could have a more integrated understanding of the founding. Kids could understand, whoa, this was not a certain thing that can be talked about. This could have, matter of fact, it should not have happened. They shouldn't have won, right? But you can't really understand that if you don't pull the camera back a little bit farther away from Constitution Hall or Philadelphia or even Monticello to see all the different sources of power and contestation they needed to balance. None of that diminishes the accomplishment of the founding. I think that's an important thing that people need to understand, that to talk about challenge doesn't diminish the fact that they ended up creating a new nation that has survived this long. So I think I would call for kind of an enriching or broadening of the story that doesn't diminish the founding as the accomplishment that it was.
So this is a perfect example of why you hold your fire and let other smarter people talk first. As if I had come in as gung-ho as I wanted to, I would have come across as so dim, because the points all three of you have raised are absolutely magnificent. But I'm going to bring us back to Sarah's point, which is, why do teachers love teaching the founding so much? Because we've heard the word origin story, origin story. It's our origin story. And what a great one it is. It's so inspiring. We start poetically, hat tip to Thomas Jefferson. We kick off the shackles of monarchical tyranny. We fight a war against a world power. We win this war against all odds. There's this incredible document that we then write that guides us for the next 250 years. It's such a beautiful story. And what I think of it as is the hook to the larger narrative of American history, an American history that is filled with so many chapters, some so inspiring, some so dark, and so many, I should say, in the middle somewhere where, I would certainly hate to take a presentist viewpoint and apply it back to history, but looking back and going, oh my God, what were they thinking? But other times looking at how America rose to the occasion and made the right decision. And overall, you see this just long arc of progress. It's this beautiful thing. And what I think about when you think of a good hook is it invites you into the rest of the story. And so, yeah, I think, guilty as charged, right? I've got my James Madison pin. I've got my pocket constitution. I love the founding story. I love teaching it for all the reasons just shared.
I got a pocket constitution here somewhere.
Yeah, you bet. Hey, listen, that's how we all prove that we're legit. I should have pulled it out of my coat pocket to really prove the point. Mine, just to fully prove my nerd credentials, I'm not going to open it up because this is a very special one. I asked Justice O'Connor years ago to sign it, and I had her sign it, Article 3, her name next to Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution. So I'm not going to open that up to preserve her beautiful signature there. But I think we bring that enthusiasm, that sort of nerdiness about the founding era. I mean, every social studies teacher can name their favorite founding father, their favorite article in the Constitution. I can go on, so on and so forth. But we take that, we hook the students in, and we bring them into this story that is their story. It is our shared national inheritance, and the good parts and the bad. And then we refer back to it with every chapter. What are the ideals of America that we're living up to in this chapter? Where are the ones where we're falling short? And so with so much due respect for all the reasons why it can sometimes feel problematic, why we can sometimes miss the point, bury the lead, I think the founding story is really important, and I will always emphasize it in my teaching.
Emma, you left out that terrible winter at Valley Forge. I mean, it's a nice.
That was a rough one. Think of the starvation. Oh yeah, goodness. But truly. But that's part that. I mean, that is such a beautiful story in and of itself, right? Overcoming that and the crossing of the river. I could go on, but also still.
And you could do a whole day on that painting alone. I mean,
the crossing. That's right. But to learn it and to teach it in a way where you can feel that pride in that moment, but also look at other episodes and say, right, we got that one wrong. That was not our best work. We can do better than this. And I think that's the kind of teaching that American history teachers are here for. It's the kind of history learning that students are thirsty for. And based on the polling that I've seen, it's what parents and the larger community want from us, that true, honest accounting where we celebrate the good, we recognize the bad, and we do our best to live up to our shared ideals.
The complexities that you're outlining, and those tensions and the ability to recognize this momentous moment of a founding, all of those are reminding me of something that other historians have brought up in AHA panels and conferences, that we and our students are not responsible for what happened in the past. We are responsible for what happens in the future. But in order to shape that future, we have to understand where we've been, where we've come from, and what's happened. So, we're hurtling towards 2026. As someone who is helping to pull together a special 1776 themed issue of the AHA's journal, I'm particularly feeling this pressure. But so America 250 celebrations are being planned. What can we do as educators, as scholars, to engage this energy for commemoration and for public memory? David, you're an expert in memory creation.
Never trust your memory. That's all I've learned. Anyway, well, I at the risk here of doing what you may not want, I want to start with the politics of this. Memory is always about the politics of memory. That's why we fight about it. That's why we divide over it. That's why we have competing narratives, which is what historical memory is all about. I think we have to, from middle school and high school teachers on up through university profs, museums, the National Park Service, hopefully it survives, we have to prepare. to counter what is, we can be quite sure now, is going to come from the 1776 Commission, recently revived by the Trump administration. Again, I don't mean to politicize the conversation, but let's be honest. The White House is going to have millions of dollars to spend on whatever they conceive of as their vision of a national celebration. I mean, we already have executive orders about patriotic history. We have all kinds of orders about eliminating language and words and so on and so on. The National Park Service has been hit badly by firings of people, the National Archives, etc. So we're going to have, not just our dukes up to be defensive. We're going to have a plan to present the best possible scholarship converted into great narratives and great stories that can be made into public programming. And that's all across the map, particularly in museums, because they're the most popular places people go, and historic sites. God knows historic sites. But we're going to have to be ready to make the case that the founding is, as we've just been saying, this amazing, remarkable, contingent, complex series of events. And probably the Americans were bloody lucky to win. That Constitution was a miserable summer trying to hammer out those compromises. And in some ways, they were terrible compromises, and sometimes they were ingenious compromises. And sure, people pick their favorite founders and so on, and they will. But we've got to be ready to defend the essence of what history actually is. That's what's at stake right now. And the founding, this 2026 anniversary is a chance to do that, to help the public as best we can as a broad profession understand that history is not just some pleasing narrative that will make you feel good. There's an executive order out there that says teaching should only be about the values of the founders. Undefined, of course. Now, what does that mean? There's nothing that could be more contested than that idea of the values of the founders. They were very different depending on where they were from. So I want to just start with that. We have to be ready to fight for what history actually does in our lives and our society and our consciousness. It prepares us for what's to come. A sense of history is being prepared with some knowledge that whatever may be happening to you has probably happened before.
This kind of picks up on the point that I was making before about ways to make this moment meaningful to students who may not be taking a class on the founding. What they are taking a class on is the very unfolding commemoration itself. So I think we should make the commemoration a historical subject that's enacted before their very eyes. And the point of it would be to understand and appreciate, and the historians are in this conversation, but we're not the only ones, what's at stake. And I think, the best example we could give of civic education is actually taking advantage of this conversation to give it shape, to give it form, not just have it be, a pinball bouncing all around, but to look beneath it. What is it that we're making of all this? So I think to make students' own experience of history a subject of study, and maybe a fun assignment would be to ask them, how would you commemorate this moment? What would you do? And how would you take advantage of where you live? Is where you are right now, does it matter in this commemoration? Or is this something that just happened off in a few cities in the East? So I think that there's to embrace the conversation we're getting ready to have and use it as an example to our students of how you can actually make sense of history as you're living through it.
We were talking about this a little bit when we were getting ready for this conversation. And I had to think about, am I on the right panel? I don't teach the founding era. But then when I was talking to my colleagues and thinking about it some more, I was thinking along sort of the same lines, right? Ed was proposing we could think about having students think through memory or thinking about commemoration. How was it done 100 years ago? How are we about to do it now? But a similar question that teachers can ask who are not teaching the founding era is, how have other people perceived this at different points, right? Either in American history, right? What did it mean in the 1890s? What did it mean in the 1920s? Or what did it mean just before the US entered World War I, for example, right? But also, what did it mean to the rest of the world? What did it mean to the French in 1789? What did it mean to the Vietnamese in 1945, right? I think that is also thinking about what is history and people interpreting different documents or different events in different ways and then acting upon those in different ways. I think, and teaching students that essentially is teaching students agency, right? You can have an opinion about this too. Just like you can have an opinion about the article that was just published in the local newspaper or whatever you saw on social media today. You can have a critical opinion because you know that people have interpreted these things differently. And I think that's how we can make clear to them that history in and of itself is civic education and gives them agency, right? You don't have to be upset that things in the past were not always great, or that your own country has done things that are not always great, but you can study them from different angles and then make a decision about what you're going to do today. I think that's what most history teachers are hoping to achieve in their classrooms.
So I'm going to come at this in just a slightly more logistical manner to say that because I've seen, sort of some of the early planning around America 250 and the different state coalitions coming forward. So my sort of broad scale advice is to don't wait for something to come to you. Go out there and create it. My favorite definition of a citizen comes from Professor Peter Levine from Tufts University. He says, a citizen anywhere in the world is someone who seriously asks the question, what should we do? Well, as Americans, on the eve of our 250th anniversary, we should ask ourselves this question, what should we do? We should not wait for federal or state or local governments to put on the best celebration and commemorative experience ever, although I do believe a lot of them will do so. But there are some cracks there. There's a lot going on in the world. So if in the absence of what you see as the right opportunity to fully commemorate, celebrate, create your own and don't do it by yourself. Find your fellow Americans, particularly those with whom you disagree, reach across the aisle, take this pluralistic mindset and say, what can I do in my community to make this meaningful? Something I did not know about my community. I live on St. Simon's Island in the Golden Isles of Georgia, Southeast Georgia. And one of my friends from the Bill of Rights Institute informed me that they use the wood in St. Simon's Island to build this really historical boat in American history. And I'm like, what? Look this up. Oh my goodness. The wood from my island was used to create this incredible American military ship. There's my opportunity, or one of many opportunities. So look for those, lean into your local history. And then, my advice to educators is just, you don't need these opportunities. The anniversary can be something you celebrate and commemorate every day or every week or every month, and just little snippets here and there, and bringing students into the story. You don't have to have a parade and floats and fireworks, although I love those. Those are great. But just look for those daily opportunities to remind students of our founding documents, our founding ideals, and that, again, that origin story, which is our shared national inheritance.
Sarah, could I just, this has all been wonderful, but as one old enough to remember the bicentennial.
Not old enough. How about you, Katharina? Are you old enough?
No, you guys are not, I can assure you. Not even close. Ed, maybe, I don't know. But I was a high school teacher in 1976. We were wearing 76 medallions. We had, bicentennial minutes over the PA system. It was a cool moment. But one of my distinct memories of that, and I'm sure somebody's written this, is that we were having that right after Watergate. And what that meant at that time is that, my gosh, the Constitution had worked. The law had worked. Rule of law had somehow been reinforced. the system worked. That was one of the great legacies of Watergate. And it was only like 2 years after that, if that. Today, we're having this commemoration in a time when, well, is the Constitution working very well right now? What about that thing called rule of law? Um, uh, Article 2 of the Constitution was rewritten last summer in the immunity decision. I mean, and students can embrace this, can understand this. They're living through a time now when the Constitution is news every day, every day. And it's a very conflicted history. So we don't have this glow of, the system worked that we had after Watergate. And it made the bicentennial kind of a big sigh of relief. At least that's the way I remember it. I'm probably remembering it wrong. But I don't think we're in that kind of a situation now at all. Just wanted to throw that in.
No, I appreciate that, David. And I think, another way of looking at it is sort of what your point about it's never been so in the news as it is now. And so I feel for today's American history and civics teachers, because a lot of what is happening is not the norm. It's not usual. The flip side of that is the students are coming in looking for guidance, asking questions. They're engaged. I promise you, they're not running to their math teachers and their English teachers going, "Did you see the news last night?" Right? They're running to their social
they want
studies
answers
teacher.
from you.
So seeing that as an opportunity to talk about the founding documents, talk about the ideals that we all agree upon as Americans that are in those documents. And then what I've heard from teachers, and I'm not going to claim this as my own brilliant idea, is to talk about, what is sort of expected and normal versus what is unusual in this moment, because so many of us strive to be nonpartisan in this moment. I think it's really important educators take this seriously, despite all the accusations of indoctrination. The report talks about this. What you see from the report and its findings, that teachers are, really pushing back against it and saying, no, that's not what we're doing. We're trying so hard in this moment. So to capitalize on that student interest, find the words and the language that makes sense in your community, that feels safe to talk about it. And, if you're in Newton, Massachusetts versus Amarillo, Texas, it's going to be so different. That's part of the beauty of our federal and local control system. It's part of the complexity and frustration of it. I'll lean into the beauty here and say, capitalize in this moment where all of America is talking about this. And if they're not talking about it, they're thinking about it. And then, my message to administrators and parents of the world is, go find your social studies teachers, pat them on the back, tell them you support them, ask them what they're doing, but know that they're there doing their best to help students make sense of it all and to develop the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that our constitutional democracy requires of them.
Well, so it is Civic Education Week, which means that we absolutely must have a little bit deeper dive into the civic angle of this too. And in the report, when we note that almost every teacher that we surveyed said that preparing students for civic participation was an important or very important goal in history education, with 94% of teachers identifying it as an important or very important goal. All but 8 of more than 3,000 teachers surveyed said that civic participation is a priority in their teaching. So my question to you all, what lessons about civics can students learn from studying history and from thinking historically? Katharina, I'm going to turn to you first.
Mm-hmm. I think I answered that a little bit already, but I think I have a big poster in my classroom that has the John Lewis quote that says, "Democracy is not a state, it is an act." And I think historians try to show that, right? When we teach politics, we don't portray it as this complicated machine, like, here's the Constitution, this is how it works. The senator gets reelected every 6 years and the Congress people get reelected every 2 years, and you have to be this age to be elected president, right? We don't portray it that way. We portray the US government, or any government for that matter, as changing over time, given what types of decisions people make in a given context, right? And that, I think, is my biggest mission in the classroom, that people see that history is changed over time and that it's changed that's pushed by humans. Sometimes bad decisions, sometimes good decisions, but that humans have agency. So I want them to walk out of my classroom and understand American history, or I also teach world history, understand world history, but realize that they're actors and that they're agents and that they can take, just like the historical actors that we study, that had different options on the table, and sometimes they decided really badly and sometimes they decided well. They can do the same thing. That's what I want them to see. My own civics education was diagrams on a whiteboard. Here is, and then with arrows, right? Like that's how I had to study the German Constitution. Not how we should teach it. We should teach it as like constantly changing meanings and constantly changing institutions that are being put to use by different people for different reasons, right? And that regular actors have influence over those institutions. I think rather than this is this complicated machine and you need to memorize this, and then it's just going to be there forever, right? Working this way forever. That's what I try to do in any subject, in any historical subject matter that I teach.
So if I can piggyback on that, in my introduction, you heard that I taught American history and American government in North Central Florida, economics a little bit and poorly. But I was really big on the history and government. And for me, as a political science and history undergrad, I couldn't divorce the two subjects. I couldn't teach American history without infusing the politics. I couldn't teach American government without infusing the history. Now at iCivics, we have 4 values that guide our vision for academic integrity. One is accuracy, one is objectivity, one is political balance. But the 4th one, and the one I have to explain very often, is contextuality, which is that everything we present to students, we try to present in the context of the moment. So if you're teaching government, civics, it will make so much more sense if you can take these really dry, abstract concepts and place them in the context of certain moments in American history and help students make sense of things. What they think of executive power might be really different from Watergate versus how they feel about it today. And vice versa, if you're going to be trying to teach history and understanding these things that are happening, these major movements, these major trends, it really helps to have the political science, the civics, the government understanding of these concepts, the theory behind them, and not theory at a graduate level, but theory at a fair K-12 lay level to inform those. So for me, they can't be divorced. And at the end of the day, it just enriches the study. And if you bring in that inquiry-based approach, you match it with primary sources, and you allow students to ask questions about the history and the civics and the government and the politics, it's just so much more relevant, so much more fascinating, and so much more engaging for the learner, I believe.
Go ahead, Ed.
I was just going to say that in the act of civic engagement, I'd like to cede the 3 minutes I was going to use to answer this question to hear the questions from the people who are with us. My short answer is history puts meat on the bones of civics.
Great way to put it.
Well, I have a lot to say on this one, but are we only going till 8 p.m. Eastern?
We are, but
Well,
please,
we better go to the audience then.
David, have a word, and then we'll go to questions.
Well, Katharina, in my high school teaching years, I used to have a huge poster of Walt Whitman, among other people, up in my classroom. And I don't remember what the quote was on it, but I hope it was from his poem called "Oh, Democracy." It probably wasn't, but that's what I would have wished, because it's in that poem and also in his Democratic Vistas, where Whitman reminds us, yes, civics is about the structures, but it's really about how humans treat each other. Democracy is about how humans treat each other. And it's in that poem where Whitman said, democracy means I will have nothing that my neighbor doesn't also have. That's why it's so hard. That's why democracy is so difficult, because none of us are really very good at that. But I don't know what that quote was on the poster. It should have been that.
All right. Well, we
Sarah,
have
oh, go ahead.
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because I got in early and I said I was going to answer a question live minutes ago. And so I wanted to say to Daniel McInerney's really great question at 7:22 p.m. He asked, which civic learning organizations provide our K-12 college with the most reliable, accessible, and evidence-based information? I'm going to give you the one really clear answer, and it's they all do. I have yet to encounter an organization out there that has made any sort of strides in outreach to K-12 that isn't doing their best. And they come at it from different angles. And if you look hard enough, you could probably find some ideological biases here and there. And I'm sure there's some exceptions, there always are. But by and large, every organization represented on this screen right now, and I can include a million others: National Constitution Center, Gilder Lehrman Bill of Rights Institute, Center for Civic Education, Generation Citizen, Street Law. I'm so sorry to anyone who I didn't think of in this moment. There are so many providers out there doing their darndest to provide accurate, objective, nonpartisan resources that teachers can trust and use in their classrooms. And if there's one out there that's like really trying to indoctrinate, I don't really know of them. And it's probably because they're like so on the margins, it's not even worth paying attention to them. Sarah, sorry, back to you.
Would anyone else like to note any resources that they're familiar with that they would particularly point our audience to?
I would say that Annie Evans at New American History has actually made learning resources based on the lesson plan that pre-service or a group of teachers could use and sort of analyze it as a document in and of itself. So at newamericanhistory.org, you can find a two-part analysis and maybe a way to share with your students as well. Okay, here's what the historical profession is saying about itself, and gives you some guidance about how you might structure that conversation.
Hear, hear.
You know, Sarah, I love some of these questions in the Q&A. The Sue Eikenberry question: if our students see things happening in the current situation that may be wait a minute, in the current or near future curriculum that may be ahistorical, what should they be encouraged to do? Well, go find the good history, go find the better history, go look it up, go find the truth as close as you can get to it, and then replace the ahistorical part. Anyway, I like that question.
Good question.
What if the students find something ahistorical? Thank God they do. Anyway, there are a lot of good questions here.
There are excellent questions here. This is kind of combines a few of them. How do we loop in the community, such as our local libraries and the expansion of democracy, history, and politics? Are there things that teachers can do to bring this history to the community? So essentially, how do we get from the classroom out into our community? Emma, do you want to speak to that?
I mean, what the biggest advice I can say is do it, right? And so, recognizing a lot of the incredible names and the participant list here and the organizations they represent. If you're a classroom teacher, if you're a local social studies supervisor or district administrator, any one of these roles, you don't have to go to Washington, D.C. You don't have to go to your state capital. The stuff in your own local community is so rich, and you've got these incredible, just thoughtful professionals who are dedicated to this work and want to invite you in. And as an educator, hey, just get the kids there and they will take over. And trust me, if you think a librarian can't handle a classroom, they can handle it better than any of us teachers any day. So, make the outreach, ask, but I think that's what makes this history so much more engaging for the students. I mean, for me, the question is always authenticity and relevancy. If you're visiting your local historical center, your local historical society, your local library, you are going to get authenticity and relevancy in spades. And as the classroom teacher, with other than logistics of getting the kids there or vice versa, you don't have to do a thing, because these professionals are going to give your kids a world-class educational experience.
Every teacher in America should go plan an event with their local public library, if for no other reason than to support the public library.
Absolutely.
And show kids where it is. Get them their card. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we end, I wanted to note that as part of Civic Learning Week, Ken Burns will be joining PBS Learning Media to continue discussing some of these issues. And there will be a new release of a film called The American Revolution, which will be out this year, so that folks will be able to engage that in 2026. So I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank, Katharina, Emma, David, Ed. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and for a really engaging conversation. Thank you to everyone who was able to listen in, and we look forward to seeing you at a future event. Good night.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to the American Historical Association. This was great. Appreciate you all.